Hello, welcome back to Chat About It, Don't Chat About It with me, Rachel, aka the Queen of the Woke, because what could be more woke than my Death Note sign over there? So, before we get going, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. This video has a good chance of being ratioed because of its actual content that's going to be going on in it. We're talking about the NHS today, blocking puberty blockers for children. I put out a poll earlier on in the day saying breaking news. The NHS is banning puberty blockers for children. Question: should children have puberty blockers for being referred to a doctor about their gender? 14 of you voted. Now, obviously, I only asked this question 6 hours ago. I don't have much of a following, so only 14 of you answered. That's absolutely fine. And obviously, more people will answer as time goes on. But 14 of you said 100% no, children shouldn't have puberty blockers. And Daddy Deadly 3428 said altering a healthy body due to a psychological issue should be a last resort, if at all, and so shouldn't ever be given to children. And Madonna said stop trans madness. So it was released. Children to stop getting puberty blockers at gender identity clinics, says NHS England. Confirmation comes after public consultation and decision to close gender identity development service in London. Children who have gender dysphoria will no longer be given puberty blockers, NHS England has said, ahead of a radical change in how it cares for them. There is not enough evidence about either how safe they are to take or whether they are clinically effective to justify prescribing them to children and young people who are transitioning, it added. The government welcomed NHS England's landmark decision, which it said was in the best interests of children. NHS made the announcement in response to the results of a public consultation on the ban, which it first proposed last June, and a review of available evidence by the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, NICE. A spokesperson said NHS England has carefully considered the evidence review conducted by NICE and further published evidence available to date. We have concluded that there is not enough evidence to support the safety of or clinical effectiveness of puberty suppressing hormones to make treatment routinely available at this time. Puberty blockers arrest the physical changes in a child's body that puberty brings, such as the development of breasts or facial hair. The NHS's decision means that the new regional services for caring under 18s with gender dysphoria, which open next month, will not use them as part of the treatment. So it will allow children to go through puberty at the correct time that a body should be going through puberty. From now on, children and young people will only be able to get them if taking part in a clinical trial. At least one such trial is due to start later this year, but no details, such as who will be eligible to join it, have been published. The NHS's decision reaffirms the position it adopted last year on puberty blockers after Dr. Hilary Cass, who is leading an independent review into the gender identity services for under 18s, issued interim advice warning against routine prescription of the drugs. In late 2020, NHS England asked Cass, an ex-president of Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, to look into gender identity services, and at the time they were provided for the whole of England solely by NHS's Tavistock and Portman Mental Health Trust in London. Its treatment of under 18s with gender dysphoria, including its use of puberty blockers, had attracted criticism. Fewer than 100 children and young people are taking puberty blockers. The Trust's Gender Identity Development Service is closing at the end of this month. The first 2 new centres will open in April at 2 specialist children's hospitals, Great Ormond Street in London and Alder Hayes Children's Hospital in Liverpool, and NHS hopes to ultimately create 7 or 8 centres. So children are still going to be having access to gender identity clinics and all of that. So that's not being removed. So that's good. However, the services they provide will be what NHS sources say will be fundamentally different from the current service in line with the CAS recommendations. Maria Field, the Health Minister said, "We welcome this landmark decision by the NHS to end routine prescription of puberty blockers and this guidance which recognises that care must be based on evidence, expert clinical opinion and in the best interest of the child. The NHS must ensure its gender identity service protect, support and act in the best interest of the children and will continue to work with NHS England to protect children in this area." Stonewall voiced its concerns about the new policy. All trans young people deserve access to high quality, timely healthcare, a spokesperson for the LGBTQ plus rights charity said. I'm reading that as it's written, just so you know. For some, an important part of this care comes in the form of puberty blockers, a reversible treatment that delays the onset of puberty, prescribed by expert endocrinologists, giving young person extra time to evaluate their next steps. We are concerned that NHS England will be putting new prescriptions on hold until a research protocol is up and running and at the end of 2024. So, a very quick question. Would delaying puberty actually help a young person make a well-reasoned choice for themselves, particularly when in England, we technically say that under the age of 18, the adults have to make the decision on behalf of that child. So how would this be beneficial by delaying puberty? I guess I'm asking. Continuing. Sex Matters, which campaigns on how sex is used in law and other environments, praised NHS England for what it is said was a return to evidence-based policymaking in relation to gender identity services. This is a momentous development in the course correction of NHS England's approach to treating childhood gender distress, said Mayor Forstater, its executive director. The significance of NHS England's statements that there is not enough evidence to support the safety of clinical effectiveness of puberty blockers cannot be overstated, given the success that activists lobby groups have had in portraying them as harmless and reversible treatment. Okay, so then we're going to the NHS website. This is gender dysphoria. That article was by The Guardian, by the way, and of course it will be linked below. So the treatment for young people now, as it stands, you get to see a multidisciplinary team, clinical psychologist, clinical psychotherapist, not physiotherapist, child and adolescent psychiatrist, family therapist, and a social worker. And they will carry out an assessment over 3 to 6 appointments over several months, and depending on the results of the assessment, options for the children include family therapy, individual child psychotherapy, parent support or counselling, group work for young people and their parents, regular reviews to monitor gender identity improvement, referral to local children and young people's mental health service, CYPMHS, for more serious emotional issues. And most treatments offered at this stage are psychological rather than medical. This is because, in many cases, gender variant behavior or feelings despair as children reach puberty, which is normal. Of course, if you want to have a look, this is also linked below. I had a quick look from Mayo Clinic as well, because I couldn't find this on the NHS website. It might just be me looking in the wrong place, but I couldn't find it. I looked up some the possible benefits of puberty blockers. They improve, this is supposed, okay, improve mental well-being, ease depression and anxiety, improve social interactions with others, lower the need for future surgeries, ease thoughts of or actions of self-harm. And then we go down, and this is what I was really looking for, was the side effects and complications. I'm pretty sure this is not all of them. Swelling at the site of the shot, weight gain, hot flashes, headaches, mood changes. And this is the long-term side effects: growth spurts, bone growth, bone density, fertility, depending on when the medicine is started. When was that created by Mayo Clinic? 2023. How is, like, is Mayo Clinic like the go-to for American sites? I was trying to find a study, but this particular study that I found was behind a paywall. So I had to then find the next closest one. Okay, so children on puberty blockers saw mental health change, new analysis. And that's why I said, like, supposed, because I knew that this was coming up, because there's some discrepancy about the mental health with puberty blockers. So this study, the majority of the children, what study was this called again? The majority of the children in a landmark study on puberty blockers experienced positive or negative changes in their mental health, new analysis says. The original study of 44 children who took controversial drugs for a year or more found no mental health impact, neither benefits nor harms. So this is the original. But a reanalysis of that data now suggests 34% saw their mental health deteriorate, whilst 29% is improved. The authors of the original report have welcomed the new evidence. Now, of course, science is out there to be disproven, right? So that's why they welcomed the evidence. The reanalysis, which has been seen by BBC Newsnight, questions some of the conclusions from the 2021 study about the potential mental health impact of puberty blockers on under 16s. It also sheds some light on this much debated but little understood area of children's medicine. The new study has not been peer-reviewed in a peer-reviewed journal yet. The authors say they felt there was an urgency in getting the information into public domain. Right, okay. So this was the study that I wanted to look at. So the original study, in 2011, a team from the Tavistock's Gender Identity Development Service, GIDS, England's only NHS specialist gender clinic for children, and University College London Hospitals, UCLH, embarked on what became known as the Early Intervention Study. They enrolled 44 children aged between 12 and 15 over the following 3 years. The study looked at the impact of taking puberty blockers, medicines used to postpone puberty in children, was having. It resulted in the age at which puberty blockers could be offered on the NHS being lowered. When the landmarks study results were published in 2021, it revealed blockers brought no changes in psychological function to those taking them. But this differed from earlier findings of Dutch researchers who pioneered this approach to treating gender dysphoria. They reported a positive impact on young people's mental health and well-being. And then it got some links there. The early intervention study used sources from both parent and child questionnaires, which assessed children's behavioral and emotional problems. These were widely and reliably used in psychology in many countries and include more than 100 questions on things like school, feelings, and relationships. There are no change. The overall findings, of no change was based on a group average or mean of those scores given at different points in time. That's a very standard way of doing things, Professor Chris Evans, a retired psychiatrist and psychotherapist, told Newsnight. The problem is it doesn't pay attention to how much variation there was across participants. For example, a quarter could score extremely high, a quarter could score high, a quarter could score quite badly, and a quarter could score extremely badly, yet the group average would be somewhere in the middle. That's interesting. Reanalysis of data. So Professor Susan McPherson from the University of Essex and David Freeman, a retired social scientist, have since reanalyzed the data. They instead looked at the individual trajectories of each of the young people in the early intervention study. They found 12 months of puberty blockers injections, 34% of the children had reliably deteriorated, 29% had reliably improved, and 37% showed no change. According to the self-reported answers, the proportions were a little lower in the parents' scores, but in 3/4 of the cases, there were broad agreements between parents and their children. The impact on each of the children varied. For example, a child who deteriorated, it could mean from being psychologically well, not needing treatment for their mental health, to meeting criteria for psychiatric diagnosis such as depression or anxiety. Whereas a child who improved could move from needing mental health treatment to being considered mentally well. However, what neither the original research paper nor the reanalysis can do is tell us why these young people fared so differently. The study is small, just 44 young people, and because of the way the original study was designed without a control group, interesting, experts can't interfere cause and effect to say these changes in well-being were caused by being on puberty blockers, sorry. Well, scientists are going to have a field day with this. So they need what this is saying is they need to do this effectively. For example, like having a control group, having a group on puberty blockers, and having a group on a placebo. Maybe, that would be a fair study, right, scientists? I'm just asking, would that be a fair study? But despite those limitations, these new analyses suggest the need for more research, both into this specific group and the impact of puberty blockers more generally. Mr. Friedman argues it is vital that young people and their families have the best information when making medical treatments. Now, there were gaps in the evidence. In June, NHS England announced that puberty blockers will only be made available to young people taking part in clinical trials. And CAS's interim report into children gender services, sorry, my reading is terrible, highlighted gaps in evidence around the drugs, and a systematic review carried out by NICE found the quality of the evidence for the use of puberty blockers in this extent to be very low. Similar reviews have been undertaken in Sweden and Finland, with both reaching the same conclusion. A number of the European countries have begun taking a more cautious, less medical approach to helping young people questioning their gender identity. Both the Tavistock and Portman Trust and UCLH said they welcomed new contributions to the evidence base around how to support young people with gender incongruence, I think that's pronounced. Sorry, this is a cold read, by the way. A spokesperson from Tavistock and Portsmouth NHS Foundation Trust said data from the original study had been published to allow other researchers to conduct further analyses. It said the analysis plan for the original study was independently produced by experts in medical statistics. A spokesperson for UCLH said it supported Dr. Cass's recommendation that research should be fully embedded in the development of new services for children and young people expressing gender incongruence. If I've butchered that word, please tell me how to say it. Apologies. They added, "We will work closely with the new National Children and Young People's Gender Dysphoria Research Oversight Board to support the collection and analysis of robust data in this area. The board will oversee the design and conduct of the new puberty blocker research trial, as well as ensure research is embedded at the heart of the new Children and Young People's Gender Dysphoria Services." The CAS review team told the BBC that it has commissioned an updated systematic review of our academic publications of puberty blockers. This review, along with its analysis, will be taken into account in its final recommendations, which are expected to end, which are expected by the end of the year. Right. So what they're saying is currently at the moment, this is being pulled back because it needs more research. They found that the original research was not substantial enough to warrant children having being put on puberty blockers from such an early age. Now, I did try to have a look on the internet for success stories, and the only one that I actually found was this on News Nation, but I can't access the website because I'm in Europe, which is great. So I did wonder about looking for it on Twitter. And I spelled success wrong. But it was a bit of a struggle to see what I could find out. I've been looking, I have been looking, and I just really couldn't find any like success stories. I was looking specifically for success stories with regards to puberty blockers and how like it would be, you know, considered successful as a way to sort of give it from the aspect of the trans community. But I really couldn't find anything. I mean, that could just be me again looking in the wrong place. So if you know of any trans success stories, please send them to me. Chat about it, don't chat about it at gmail.com. That's my email address. If you go to my actual channel, you go down, there's a bit where you can, in my about section, that you can actually find the email. You can send those to me. I tried looking for it. I've been looking for it for over an hour. I couldn't find it. I did find something else that was interesting. Charlie Bentley Astor decided to share her story. Okay. This was me, and this was posted when was this posted? March 12th, 2024, so it's posted yesterday. This was me. I was 17 and SUICIDAL every day. I hated my body. I had done everything to get away from it, including wearing oversized clothes, binding my breasts, and eating as little as possible to prevent my body from developing. I have always been a doer, climbing trees, fingers in the mud, sprinting along with the boys. I knew I wasn't a boy, and that was okay because I could do everything a boy could. But when the first rumors of puberty hit at 10 years old, things began to change. Climbing trees was no longer ladylike. Yeah. I was no longer congratulated on my speed, but my breast size. Men began to make lewd comments that I didn't understand, but I knew they started when my body changed and that they wanted me to do things that I didn't want. I can relate to this, that the climbing trees thing, I was a tomboy. Okay, I used to climb trees, I did all sorts of things. And then one day I was told that I really shouldn't be doing things like that anymore because it wasn't ladylike. I did everything I could to get away from it. I told my friends and people on the internet that if I felt this way, because I was never meant to be a girl, I was born in the wrong body. For almost 10 years, I identified as genderqueer, non-binary, a they, them, and was identifying as he, them, believing I was really a man. By the time I was trying, by that time, I was trying to get mastectomy, hysterectomy, and a referral to a gender clinic. In truth, I was not a man because this is not possible. In truth, I was making myself ugly and sexist uh, because I never wanted to be sexualized and lusted over. My personality leans into the masculine temperament, and I had undiagnosed autism. Only when I began to accept what had happened to me and that I couldn't escape myself and that I shouldn't want to, that's when things got better. 3 years on, my body is intact from the surgeon's knife. I am confident in my character and in my body and my character. I am loved and I love. Sorry, I read that in completely wrong order, but you get the gist. This will be linked so you can see it. I was never a male. I could never become a male. People are not born in the wrong body. They struggle to be in their body. Chopping people's body parts off is not the answer to gender distress. It's always listening. And yesterday, I think yesterday it was Detrans Awareness Day. Did I? Was that yesterday? Puberty is a human right, and those are in hashtags. And she also has a gender transition story, which is linked here. It is behind a paywall, so I couldn't access it because I'm not paying for Telegraph. But it is there if you want to go and read it. And of course, the tweet will be linked and you can go and have a look at her story. And this also brings me to Kira Bell. I found this story, and this story, strangely enough, I wasn't aware of. It's quite sad. I have read this. So I will obviously link this. I'm going to try and wrap up the video in a moment, but let's have a quick look at this story. So from the earliest days, my home life was unhappy. My parents, a white English woman and a black American who got together while he was in Britain with the US Air Force, divorced when I was about 5. My mother, who was on welfare, descended into alcoholism, and mental illness. Although my father remained in England, he was emotionally distant to me and my younger sister. I was a classic tomboy, me too, which was one of the healthier parts of my early life in Letchworth, a town of about 30,000 people, an hour outside London. Early in childhood, I was accepted by the boys. I dressed in typically boy clothing and was athletic. I never had an issue with gender. It wasn't on my mind. Then puberty hit. Everything changed for the worse. A lot of teenagers, especially girls, have a hard time with puberty, but I didn't know this. I thought I was the only one who hated how my hips and breasts were growing. Then my periods started and they were disabling. I was often in pain and drained of energy, which, for those of you who don't know, that's actually one of the most common side effects of having periods at any age. At any age you have them. But if you're not educated on that, then I can understand why you would think that. I wasn't educated on that. It was horrible. Also, I could no longer pass as one of the boys, so I lost my community of male friends. But I didn't feel I really belonged with the girls either. My mother's alcoholism had gotten so bad that I didn't want to bring friends home. Eventually, I had no friends to invite. I became more alienated and solitary. I had been moving a lot too, and I had to start over at different schools, which compounded my problems. By the time I was 14, I was severely depressed and I'd given up. I'd stopped going to school. I stopped going outside. I just stayed in my room, avoiding my mother, playing video games, getting lost in my favorite music, and surfing the internet. I'm just reading this, and there's several things that she said here that just in like it's always been some sort of a question on my mind when it comes to gender ideologies, and that's what exactly children are doing. Now, I'm not saying this is her mother's fault in any way or anything like that. I wouldn't do that. But, what are children doing? What do they have access to? I'm not saying it's also the only catalyst. There are other things that make all these things happen, and it's sad, but they do happen. Anyway, carrying on, something else was happening. I became attracted to girls. I had never had a positive association with the term lesbian or the idea that two girls could be in a relationship. This made me wonder if there was something inherently wrong with me. Around this time, out of the blue, my mother asked me if I wanted to be a boy, something that hadn't even crossed my mind. I then found some websites about females transitioning to male. Shortly after, I moved in with my father and his then partner. She asked me the same question my mother had. I told her I thought I was a boy and I wanted to become one. I was referred to the Gender Identity Development Service at the Tavistock Portman Clinic in London. There I was diagnosed with gender dysphoria, which is a psychological distress because of a mismatch between your biological sex and your perceived gender identity. By the time I got to the Tavistock, I was adamant I needed to transition. It was the kind of brash assertion that's typical of teenagers. What was really going on was that I was a girl insecure in my body who had experienced parental abandonment, felt alienated with my peers, suffered from anxiety and depression, and struggled with my sexual orientation. After a series of superficial conversations with social workers, I was put on puberty blockers at age 16. A year later, I was receiving testosterone shots. When 20, I had a double mastectomy. By then, I appeared to have a more masculine build, as well as a man's voice, a man's beard, and a man's name, Quincy, after Quincy Jones. The further my transition went, the more I realized that I wasn't a man and never would be. We are told these days that when someone presents with gender dysphoria, this reflects on a person's real or true self, that the desire to change genders is set. But this was not the case for me. As I matured, I recognized that gender dysphoria was a symptom of my overall misery, not its cause. 5 years after beginning my medical transition to becoming male, I began the process of detransitioning. And then the consequences of what happened to me have been profound. Possible infertility, loss of my breasts, an inability to breastfeed, atrophied genitals, a permanently changed voice, facial hair. Last year, I became a claimant against the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation in the judicial review, which allows petitioners in Britain to bring action against a public body they deem to have violated its legal duties. Few judicial reviews get anywhere, only a fraction obtain a full hearing, but ours did, with a panel of 3 High Court judges considering whether youth under treatment at the clinic could meaningfully consent to medical interventions. The court noted that the practitioners at the Tavistock did not put forward any clinical explanation for the dramatic rise in girls and expressed surprise at its failure to collect data of the age of the patients when they began puberty blockers. I think that's something that shouldn't actually be missing. The puberty blockers that I received at 16 were designed to stop my sexual maturation. The idea was that this would give me a pause to think about whether I wanted to continue a further gender transition. This so-called pause put me into what felt like menopause, with hot flushes, night sweats, and brain fog. All this made it more difficult to think clearly about what I should do. I'm going to link this full story for you to read. But I find it interesting that she actually described, even though she's a young woman, she described what she thought it would actually, she could compare it to, even though she's never experienced it yet: hot flushes, night sweats, and brain fog. Now, I've seen women go through menopause, and they do get this. The studies that were performed by these people were not deemed with to have enough sort of evidence to warrant these puberty blockers, which is why they've gone ahead and they've removed them as treatment on the NHS. So they're going to go ahead and they're going to do these studies, and if they are to find out that actually they are beneficial, would they put them back on? I don't know. Who can say? My question is to you. What do you think? Is this great news that puberty blockers have been banned? Is it bad news that they've banned puberty blockers? I personally don't like the idea of giving them to children, but that's just me. Other people who watch this video may have a different opinion on that. Let me know what you think. Chat about it, don't shout about it. Leave a like on this video and subscribe to my channel. And I will see you very soon. Hopefully, that's with some news that's not going to surround just gender identity. I've seen to done quite a few videos on gender identity. I'm going to keep an eye out for some news. If you see news, send it to me. Chat about it, don't shout about it at gmail.com. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.